consequences for the misspending of public money?
The consequences are that taxpayers' money is, if it's badly spent, it's badly spent. A minister has to account in the House for that, and is accountable to the House for that, and has to explain it. And the civil servants concerned have to go before the Public Accounts Committee because of the system that we operate. But I think the important point from the CNAG's report, and certainly the point that the government would make in relation to this, no money should be misspent. Every penny should be accounted for. But when you're talking in terms of massive and unprecedented growth created by this government, that in a 41 billion euro budget, the level of expenditure or misspent money is relatively very, very small.
Okay, let's put that to Bernard Durkin. Relatively small, percentage of a percentage.
Relative means nothing. In actual fact, the complacency with which the government and ministers in the Taoiseach have tried to explain away these discrepancies in public spending, I think, is the most worrying aspect of all. And the question as to what happened as a result, or what will happen as a result, there is no answer to that question. In actual fact, what the ministers try to do is to minimise the impact, to reassure the people that everything is in order. There are a number of serious areas of overspend that have been brought to the attention of the public by the Controller Auditor General's report, and in fact have emerged over the last couple of years. Now, you've mentioned them yourself in the last couple of minutes. I think that should be sufficient warning to government, to the Taoiseach and each minister to take immediate remedial action. Now, if somebody is responsible, then somebody should be identified.
What type of remedial action?
Well, remedial action, these are filing offences. 170 million of a waste is a filing offence. Somebody must be responsible somewhere. And there's no sense in the minister or the Taoiseach coming into the House and trying to explain to the House and to the Irish people that this is only a minor detail, that it's a small percentage of total overall spend.
Well, it is only a small percentage. You do accept that.
Well, if we follow that, it is not necessarily. If we follow that principle, what we will find in a couple of years' time, we have more growth, as we'll have more of this nefarious overspend, and nobody wants to explain it away.
Can I give you a quote from the... Just wait a second, Minister. Can I give you a quote, Bernard Durkin, from the Controller and Auditor General? Lump sum of 1.2 million was negotiated with the building contractor of the hospital after it was found necessary to demolish 12 partly constructed operating theatres and rebuild them. Now, that quote is from 1997. A waste of money, apparently, or so it appears from the Controller and Auditor General. Who was in power in 1997? In
1997, there was an election, you might remember, in June of 1997, and there were two governments in power. One was the Rainbow Coalition for the first part of 1997, and the incoming government were in power in the latter part of it. In 1998, the period to...
In other words, you were in power when this overspend happened.
One of the things...
overspends are part of government.
One of the questions that commentators rightly ask is, what would you do? Well, I'm not so sure that's a relevant question. But what I would do in a situation like that, if I were asked the question, I presume what the general public would want that I would do, what I would ask the simple question of the person responsible, or persons responsible, why did this happen? And who is going to pay for it now? If you're involved in a contract, and you don't live up to your contract, then there are penalties. Now, the penalties have to be provided and should be provided. And if they haven't been put in place, then the problem for the person who draws up the contract is concerned. Now, I spent many years...
You're proposing new rules then, because they weren't the rules that the government operates under the same rules that they operated when you were in power way back in 1997.
I'm sorry.
You're proposing new rules for the way they deal with contracts and with civil servants who misbehave or don't come up to the mark.
If we are going to have a situation whereby it would appear that ministers can minimise and explain away the health services at the present time, then new rules may have to be introduced. But remember this, and I spent several years in the Public Accounts Committee, one of the issues that we brought up again and again and again was in relation to public procurement and public contracts generally. And simple procedures can be put in place and should be put in place. That if you tender for something, if you purchase something, if you have a contract to carry out certain services, then there should be some means found to ensure that in the event of failing that there is a penalty.
Okay, Bernard Durkin, thanks for that. Minister, looking at the report which we were talking about there, the 1997 report of the Controller and Auditor General, it was 90 pages long. The one that you were debating last night in the House is 163 pages long, giving an indication that the problem's getting worse. Is that right?
I wouldn't say that. I think if you go through the CNAG's report over the last 10 years, you'll find that the actual amount of money proportionate to the total government spend that he queries is diminishing and diminishing fairly
It's still
rapidly.
a very substantial amount of money, is it not?
It absolutely is, and contrary to what Bernard Durkin is saying, we're not trying to minimise it, but we are trying to do something that the opposition don't believe in doing. Learn from the lessons of that. Now, Bernard Durkin is proposing that when Fine Gael and Labour get into government, that they're going to hold individual public servants responsible for this. That's It's an interesting concept, and I'm sure that the Labour Party will have very, very serious discussions with them about that.
You've been talking about the Controller and Auditor General's report, and then this other computer system in the Health Service Executive, the finance one that cost 116 million and rising. What about this new one? Apparently FISP is what it's called, another computer system in the health service, which is spiralling out of control.
Well, that's a perfectly good example of the government approach to the health service. We got a number of reports done. One of the central recommendations of this was that the health service was too disparate, that there was varying levels of control and management, employment at various levels of the various health boards and so on. We brought forward reforms, the HSE, to try and centralise this, to try and get a handle of what was going on, and the opposition screamed blue bloody murder for the whole time that we tried to get this the changes and reform brought into the health system. As a result of those changes, we now see what's happening on the ground, where the 12 billion that is currently being spent in the health service is being badly managed, basically, and moving forward. But I mean, we've had a pattern, I think, certainly over the last 12 months from Fine Gael, getting half information going out to the public, talking about 9 million euros for a scheme that was never 9 million, exaggerating.
Right, let's put that to Bernard Durkin, then respond to that, Bernard Durkin, and also respond to the charge that there is a sense that a danger in all of this, that you're actually going to undermine confidence in the public service, not just the health service, but in state institutions and civil servants by the constant carping at the Minister.
I'm afraid that the general public have remarkably little confidence in many of the services provided by government at the present time, and particularly the health services. And I'm amazed that the Minister should try to explain away the situation the way he has done. First of all, in the last couple of years it has become quite obvious that if you ask a parliamentary question of the Minister for Health, you get a reply maybe 6 months later if you're lucky, and more times than not at all. Now that means that there's no reply on the record in the House. The Minister is not accountable, the Minister cannot be held responsible. And there's clearly an attempt to be made to get away from the situation whereby ministers are held accountable to the House. Now, I ask the Minister, one of his own pets was the electronic voting system, which he engineered himself when he was Minister for the Environment, brought out into the public arena, pursued regardless of public advice that was given again and again and again, and lost to the taxpayer almost 60 million. Almost 60 million lost to the taxpayer.
Okay, Bernard Durkin. No, Dempsey, you've got 10 seconds to respond to that.
I'll be delighted to respond to that.
Very briefly.
The electronic voting system was voted through in the House with the support of all parties. It was put in place in 3 constituencies when I was Minister. It was extremely successful. It was put in place then for
and it's sitting in a warehouse now.
5 or 6. And then the opposition came, raised a whole series of red herrings in relation to it, undermined confidence in the system and the public.
So you have full confidence in the system then, do you?
Yes, I absolutely have full confidence in the system, and that would be proved at one stage. If it was rolled out, the pilot projects, is somebody trying to tell me that I wasn't validly elected in 2002?
We don't know.
Well, I think we can fairly assume that the Minister has been validly elected. That's not the point. But the point is you still have the fullest of confidence in the e-voting machines which are out there. If there was an election tomorrow, you'd be happy to have them.
I would be more than happy, and I'd say every one of my constituents that used the system would have been.
Right,
but unfortunately, because of what the opposition have done, undermined the public confidence in that, we have to go back and reprove what we proved before, that the system works and works very well.
Okay, Noel Dempsey, thank you for that revelation this morning. That's Minister for Communication, Marine and Natural Resources, Noel Dempsey, and also Bernard Durkin, the Fine Gael spokesman on the same subject.